All right, welcome everybody. We're going to be talking about this idea of beyond chatbots, why hybrid AI beats prompt-based agents for e-commerce. And to do that, we brought on a really cool person I met just a little while ago. Her name's Julia. She's coming from DigitalGenius. Julia, thanks for joining. How are you?
I'm doing great, Gabe. It was great to meet you the other week, and I'm really excited to be part of this event. So, especially with my background, I feel like it's a good fit. But yeah, very excited to be here.
Yeah, super exciting. And again, your background, what you guys doing over at DigitalGenius, I think it's all very relevant for our conversation today. And so there's a lot of good content. So I want to dive in, but I want to dive in kind of at a high level. So as I was saying, you kind of have been for almost 8 years, 9 years, I think, in AI and CX. I'd love for you to kind of take us back to when you started. What did AI in customer service actually look like then? And maybe how is it different from what you're seeing today?
For sure, for sure. So, I definitely would say it's changed a lot. When I started in the space around 2018, most AI and customer service was really just rules wrapped in chat. You'd see these huge if then trees, like, if the customer mentions returns, show this article. If they say, where's my order, show that tracking link or push them to a tracking page. It did some FAQ deflection, but it was very fragile, took a lot of maintenance, and it didn't actually do anything for the customer beyond serving information. So this is where we moved into like sophisticated decision tree flows, lots of buttons, branches, scripted journeys.
Huh.
And that gave brands really more structured and control support. But there was definitely some wins, but more realistically, it stopped at talking about the problem instead of resolving it end to end. So when we fast forward to today, we're in a very LLM forward phase, and a lot of leaders are saying, hey, why don't we just use ChatGPT or a prompt-based agent and let that handle everything?
Uh-huh.
And large language models, they're incredible at understanding and generating language, right? But they are a huge step forward. But what most e-commerce brands find pretty quickly is a beautiful conversation doesn't equal a solved problem. And I think you could probably recognize this too, is your support team isn't just chatting, they're logging into your order system, your shipping tools, your payment provider, your loyalty
Sure.
platform, or even like your subscription tool. These are like 15, 20 different systems, and they're actually doing work across all of these. So this evolution has really looked like simple bots to decision trees to LLMs, and now really the need for a hybrid approach. And that can we really wanted to talk to customers and execute the workflows behind the scenes.
Oh, fascinating. That's I love I've referred to those as kind of the old button bots, where the
Yeah.
the workflow chat bots where you couldn't even talk to them. It's like button, button, button. And then I've seen some of those, like a couple of companies back in the day had like massive workflows, like these if then trees that were just like, oh my God. Although I almost feel like those did more damage than good, like there was an idea they'd be like self-service, but I mean, they did some good stuff, but I do think they also added some general frustration. Do you feel like maybe one more double click there is, was there a moment for you where it really clicked that maybe prompts alone weren't going to be enough?
Yeah, I feel like I remember watching one of the early just plug in an LLM pilot. And on the surface, the bot sounded great, very natural, very on brand. But when you watch what was happening behind the scenes, agents were still like fixing its mistakes, logging into systems for it, and cleaning
Yeah.
up for it when it went off policy, right? So as a customer, you see this really confident bot, but the real work was still sitting with people. So the moment this landed for me was when, hey, we weren't in a chatbot era anymore. We're moving toward this hybrid AI and workflow era.
Yeah. That feels like 100%. Okay, I want to shift a little bit to this idea of maybe some myths and some different things you might experience in the space. So, you guys deal with a lot of brands, and I'm curious when these brands come to you and they say, "Well, you need AI," or "We need AI in support." What's that underlying or maybe the real problem they're running into, and what are maybe a couple of those myths that you'd think you could just clear up right away?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's two big pieces here. So one is mindset and expectations. On the mindset side, I'd say CX has historically been treated, and we talked about this on our first conversation, Gabe,
Yeah.
is it's been treated like taxes. It's seen as an unavoidable cost that you want to minimize, not as a growth or retention lever. So
Yeah.
when AI shows up, the first questions are, how many tickets can I deflect? Or how many people can I remove? Instead of something more thoughtful, like, how do I make this experience dramatically better so customers stay longer and spend more? And then on the expectation side, especially in the last 18 months, there's really this common assumption or myth that we're just going to plug in ChatGPT or prompt-based agent and we're going to get 80% automation. And like this is where it goes sideways in e-commerce, right? A generic LLM with some clever prompts can give you this nice conversation, yes, but it doesn't magically know your policies, your edge cases, your systems, or how to safely take action in them. And so what happens there is
Uh,
you end up with a bot that talks really confidently, but okay, so it's not going to reliably execute workflows. So things like changing orders, canceling within a very specific window,
mm,
issuing the right refund or updating subscriptions, and maybe even like touching loyalty points and so on. It's very brittle. So every time you change a policy or add a new use case, someone is rewriting these prompts and hoping they don't break, what already works. And then I think lastly, from a brand safety point of view, if you let the bots take actions, you're putting a free text generator between your customers and their money. So unless you wrap it with proper flows and guardrails.
yeah.
So yeah, and I think if you were to sit with your agents for a day, you'd see their job isn't just answering questions and it's really executing very specific workflows. So you
Yeah.
asked me about like where I think this is from a myth standpoint, and I think it can really be described from this conversation iceberg analogy. So if a customer types, "Where's my order, Gabe?" like that's the tiny visible tip of the iceberg. And then you can imagine underneath this whole workflow, like multiple systems, business rules, thresholds,
Totally.
exception handling. And if your AI is only good at the tip, so the conversation, but it can't actually handle the workflows underneath, you just put a
Mm,
nice UI or UX on top of the same manual workflow. Or worse,
got it.
with the prompt only setups, you risk a bot that sounds confident while actually doing the wrong thing.
Mm,
So
mm,
I think the other thing just tied to that quickly is people think that as long as it sounds human and natural, we're good. And you kind of touched on it earlier, that flows and rules are outdated. But the reality is in e-commerce brands specifically, we absolutely still need explicit flows and policies, especially for things like refunds, cancellations, loyalties, and VIP
Yeah,
experience,
for
right?
sure. For sure.
So modern AI, it can't be freelancing these decisions and it should be operating inside really well-defined workflows and guardrails.
Yeah, look, I like I like the iceberg thing. That is right. There is a lot more kind of going on there when people interact. And if you just put that, you do put a little bit of just a fancy UX. Interesting. So maybe go one step down there. So take that iceberg idea and maybe give me, maybe a quick example, maybe on like that, where is my order? Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, totally. So a good agent, when they see Wismo ticket, they're going to do a series of steps, right? So they're going to open the help ticket in the help desk. They're going to jump into the order system and pull the right order.
Okay.
They'll probably check the carrier and tracking events, compare that to your promised SLAs and internal policies. Then they're going to decide if it's, track delayed or if it's on track delayed or lost. And then they'll actually decide or choose an action. So either reassure the customer, open a carrier investigation, reship or refund, and then communicate in that right tone. So that one
Got it.
sentence from the customer, "Where is my order?" actually kicks off this really
Flowing
complex
all this
multi-step
stuff.
workflow, right? And
Yeah.
that's the underwater part of the iceberg.
Yeah, yeah, that makes tons of sense. Okay, cool. So, what would you say? I'm thinking about this. Some of the people who maybe aren't as far down this path. So, if someone's listening and they've already launched maybe a prompt only bot, um, what would you say are maybe some of the early warning signs that it's not really doing its job or it's not working the way that it should be?
For sure. And I think everyone as a customer can relate to this. And a few of these patterns will show up pretty quickly. So, one is agents are constantly correcting the bot or redoing its work. Or you're going to see a lot of, "That's not what I asked for. You're not understanding me," from feedback from customers. I've done that, screaming at voice AI all the time. So, or worse, this is a really risky one is the bot starts making up policy or saying
Mm,
yes to things that you'd never allow a human to say yes to. So, if you're seeing those, you don't have a language problem. You have a workflow and integration problem that
hmm.
really just a prompt only bot just can't fix.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think that is. I wonder how many people felt like they've yelled it. I don't know if I've yelled as
Yeah.
many at the voice bots, but I've definitely I've done the yelling at the chat bot in some form or fashion. But that can get scary. That last part where you said, it does start to make up stuff, and all of a sudden it's putting your brand in probably a pretty precarious place. Okay. Want to see if we can go switch a little bit, maybe talk proactive a little bit, reactive, proactive. So if this idea of a pure kind of prompt-based idea isn't enough, what does that more modern hybrid approach actually look like for some of these e-commerce brands? And if you could add on that, what does it look like when it's maybe then really working or working well?
Yeah. So I think the way that I describe it, or I like to describe it as, and we do at DigitalGenius, is you really want an orchestrator with specialist agents behind it. So you have an orchestrator that sits across your channels, whether that's chat, email, social, SMS, or voice. And its job is to understand what the customer wants and then which workflow it should call on and run.
Sure.
So behind that orchestrator, the specialist agents focus on particular areas. So here we have like a care agent for where's my order, returns, exchanges, cancellations, maybe subscription tweaks.
Yeah,
Then there's the proactive agent that watches your data in the background and does things like reaches out when, it sees likely problems or ad hoc.
totally.
And then a purchase or concierge agent that helps customers choose the right product. So this is where we're getting into like that end-to-end pre and post-purchase support. And then a
Nice.
complex post-purchase warranty agent that can review and validate images. And a really key piece now is an insights or voice of the customer agent. So this is what's going to look at all of your conversations to find patterns by product, by carrier, by geography. And then all of this is wrapped in no code flows and deep integrations into, your e-commerce platform, your help desk, your carriers, whatever it might be, your payment providers, loyalty and subscription tools. And so each
Oh.
AI specialist agent can actually take actions safely inside the policies that you define.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you feel just one thing on that integrate? I mean, integ- in order for these guys to work, you mentioned, deep integration. So oftentimes that's one of the harder parts if a brand wanted to do it themselves, but you mentioned e-com, help desk, payments, loyalty, subscript. That can be a pretty difficult part of the process to make these agents work. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's really important to find a partner that has a lot of these out of the box. So for example, with us, we have over 300 integrations out of the box. And because we specialize in e-commerce,
Yeah.
it's really easy for us to connect or working with a provider that is going to be flexible to customing, working with your custom homegrown systems, right?
Yeah,
Because
fascinating.
this is where you're going to be able to take actions and do that end to end as opposed to just, surfacing a nice conversation.
Wow, cool. Okay, so then one more click on that. Thinking of like these real outcomes, I wonder if you could give us a couple of those. Like, what numbers are you seeing when this is really done well?
Yeah, I think I've got a few good examples I'd want to share. With one of the running brands we work with on running, I'm sure everyone's familiar with,
Uh,
they saw about like a 250% increase in customer service conversations over time, but they actually only needed 10% more humans to handle them because roughly like 70% of incoming messages are now resolved by AI.
uh,
Most of these never actually have to be handed off to a human, and that's powered by more than 15 integrations under the hood. So you can imagine like the complexities there. And then with a
uh,
fashion brand like All Saints, they use our hybrid AI to take on repeatable high volume tickets during peak. And this is really letting them dramatically cut their backlog, especially coming off of peak. It's very
Wow, cool.
relevant, to reduce average handle time on the conversations that still reach agents because now humans aren't stuck copying tracking links all day. And then I think a
Wow.
really cool one is, and when we think especially about leaders and CX leaders in the space, is with Scentbird. So they're a large fragrance subscription brand, and their world is super repetitive by design. I think it's like 80% of their contacts are the same handful of themes. It's like, where's my order? I want to cancel. I didn't like this month's product. Maybe it arrived damaged, or like just general membership questions.
Sure, sure.
And then they process a massive amount, like millions of chats and emails per year. 70% of their email contacts are AI actionable, and more than half of those are already automated or fully resolved
Mm,
through our AI. And then on the chat side, they're seeing around 80% of contacts resolved end to end by AI. But I think what's really interesting about Sandpert is what they chose to automate. Instead of just deflecting FAQs, they said, hey, should a customer like ever have to contact us to ask where their order is? And so they built out entire Wismo flows in automation, and they did the same for cancellation and membership flows. And so you see with these newer generative capabilities, they've actually built flows that can handle multi-step scenarios. So like imagine Gabe, someone says, I want to cancel because last month's shipment never arrived. So the AI can actually, one, investigate the last order decide, should we replace it? And then in that same conversation, try to save the subscription with the right offer. So
Interesting.
this is where it starts to behave like a really good agent, not
Hmm.
just like what we talked about earlier, a static decision tree. And
Yeah.
what's nice about this too is CSAT is going to be really important here too. So when you do it this way and this well, you don't see a CSAT cliff. So when we think about brands like Scentbird and others that we work with, their CSAT still sits in the high 4.8,
Wow.
4.7, whatever it might be,
Wow.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And they're hitting faster response times, full resolution because AI is handling the repetitive work. And then humans can now focus on like the high stakes cases. But what's, I
I
think
like
from
that.
like a figures standpoint, on the reactive side alone, Gabe, we see some customers, they save like millions of dollars a year. And then
Yeah.
layer in proactive and
It
insights.
makes super powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
superpower. This is
The
like that
combo.
growth and retention lever that we talked
Yeah.
about.
Do you know, what one random question I've heard brands kind of say with AI, I'm curious on your take here, if you've experienced it, but you know, some brands are so nervous about what AI says, and you're talking about deflection rates and stuff, but so they want it to be scripted, but that kind of puts you back to like the old button bot type thing where it is like if this then that, etc. Where AI, feels like it you train it, you give it some level of instruction, but you don't give everything word for word. Any advice do you have for brands that feel like, man, if AI goes off the rails or says something that is bad or not exactly pulled from my knowledge base word for word, like how do you reconcile that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So this is again where we want to understand from like a standard workflow or structured workflow perspective, anything that's really important, like the policies around cancellation, refunds, subscription management, and so forth. That's how you guarantee it won't go off the rails. Now, with
Mm,
anything that's more conversational, like general FAQs or so forth, at least the first part of the conversation, let's
got it.
use generative AI to make it conversational. Now,
Yeah.
do have some brands that are more flexible, like, or, there are other brands that are very rigid. They don't want you going off script so much. Like, yes, change up the content so it's dynamic. It's not the same answer every time for every person.
Yeah.
But you want to be really strict with, again, things that are very
That
important,
things
like
that are
policy.
really important. So
Yes.
you find the strict stuff, you do kind
It's
of
the
get that
balance.
more mapped, and then you find the not. Okay, interesting. Curious on that. Okay, cool. Well, let's jump into this kind of just the last couple minutes, maybe just hit you with a couple of rapid fire things here, but want to go big picture for just a minute. If you're a CX leader, you're listening in here, you're feeling a little FOMO, a little bit behind, where would you kind of hone people in over the next, say, month or two, maybe next 90 days?
Yeah, so I keep it really practical and really focused. So step one is, pick one or two high volume use cases or
Yeah.
high volume, low risk use cases rather. And then for most e-commerce brands, it's going to be that where's my order, returns, a simple subscription change.
Yeah.
And then you're going to start where most of your tickets and customers pain are. Don't start with weird edge cases.
Mhm.
Then you want to sit with your team, map out the real workflow. Like when a Wismo ticket comes in, what exactly does the agent do? What systems do they touch? What
Yeah.
decisions do they make
Yeah.
under which condition? And then you do the same for like a standard return or straightforward subscription tweak. And then step three is you'd want to decide what can be fully automated and where you still want a human to sit in the loop, right? So maybe you're comfortable fully automating standard Wismo up to a certain threshold, but like big refunds or highly sensitive billing questions or VIP customers, maybe this requires agent approval. So make
Mm,
those rules really explicit. And then from there, you'd want to launch this hybrid mode. So let AI do as much as the heavy lifting as possible, whether that's gathering data, checking systems, proposing actions, and then have humans oversee and handle exceptions
mm.
on the truly high stakes conversation. So you don't need to jump straight 100% into autonomy from day one,
Yeah. Yeah.
but and then once these reactive flows are stable, you can add like a simple proactive use case on top. So
Hmm.
that might
Hmm.
be like a delay notification, pre-order explanation, or a refund confirmation after a failed
Sure.
delivery.
Sure.
This is something where you can clearly see the before and after in ticket volume and customer sentiment. So
I love it.
I'd say, Gabe, look, if you do that in the next 90 days, you'll have real automation live on your core tickets, at least one proactive experience for your customers can feel, and a clear blueprint you can extend into like
Cool.
deeper workflows.
Cool. Cool. One more just thought on that workflow step. Is that like what does that mean? Is that like whiteboarding with eight? How do you do that workflow step?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple and very analog at the start. Like you pull in a couple of your best agents, you pick one of your use cases, let's use Wismo again, and you either whiteboard it or walk through it live while they share their screen. So you literally list what are the tools they open, the fields they look at, the decisions they make, and the edge cases where they stop and escalate. Now, if you're working with an e-commerce focused partner like DigitalGenius, you're not doing this from a blank page, just to be clear. So
Mm.
we already know the standard flows for things like order status, returns, exchanges,
Right, right.
subscriptions. This has been our world for years, but this workshop is typically like 30, 60 minutes of tweaking out of the box journeys to match your policies, SLAs, brand voice, whatever it might be, rather
Okay.
than inventing a process from scratch. And
Yes.
this is actually really impressive, but we have customers live on our standard flows incredibly fast. So we had one brand go live with a Wismo flow in 24 minutes. Like, so from 24 minutes to
This
let's
is kind of
start
standard.
to answering live tickets, because it was this, let's plug into your existing systems, confirm the rules and switch it on.
Wow. Wow. That's
So yeah.
fascinating. Yeah. I don't know if anybody realized you could kind of get going that fast. So, last question, I'll let you get back to your day job here. We hit a bunch of stuff. Super interesting. Appreciate some of the examples and stories. But if you, if you had to boil everything down that we kind of talked about or hit on today, do this, not that for maybe 2025. Any quick thoughts there that you'd leave with the audience?
Yeah, I think it probably like 2 points. So one, don't try to fix e-commerce CX by dropping in a chatbot or a prompt only agent on top of that.
Yeah.
And second is do combine language models with workflows and integrations so AI can actually execute what your best agents do today, and then use your humans where, their judgment and empathy matter most.
Well, again, Julia, super fun talk track. Appreciate you taking the time. Fun to kind of dive into some of the cool things you guys are doing. Again, AICX was the topic of the day, and I think you guys definitely you guys definitely hit that. So, if someone wants to learn a little more about you, get in touch with you, learn a little more about Digital Genius, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, anyone can look me up on LinkedIn, or please go to our website where there's ways to contact us. But we're happy to kind of explore anything that anyone might need in this realm.
I love it. All right. Well, again, Julia, appreciate the time for the audience. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Gabe.